I'm Mike Penny and I'm chairman of Church Together in Reading and Berkshire, and it's my privilege to pick up my watch at the moment. It's a very important piece of equipment to time these guys, and this is about the 5th or 6th time I've done the Hustings, and I really look forward to it. To give you some idea of what's going to go on, the candidates have in front of them a little bundle of papers with numbers 1 to 8 on it. Whether we'll get through all 8 questions is a different issue. But I've given them the question so that once the question is being asked, they can open that question. Because sometimes it's very difficult for the 5th person, by the time he gets to answer the question, or she gets to answer the question, has forgotten what the question is. Anyway, I sent this email to all the candidates. I will welcome everyone and introduce the candidates. Well, they will introduce themselves. Then each candidate will have 2 minutes to say a little about themselves and say what 2 things are important to them, i.e. what they would like to do if elected, 1 local and 1 national. Then I will ask someone from the audience for the first question. The microphone is there, so whoever asks the question, can you just pick up the microphone, ask the question, put the microphone there and go and sit back down. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer. If they're still talking at the 2 minutes mark, I will stand up. If they continue for a further 10 seconds, I develop a cough. When they have answered, we will then go on to the next question. I will rotate the order in which people answer the questions so that each will have a turn of answering first, and by varying the order of people so they will not always follow the same person. We would like this to be a positive hustings. We would like to know what the candidates will do in the future, rather than saying where you disagree with what has gone on in the past. And I will ask you to respect the candidates, please. We have no objections to people clapping, but please do not boo or heckle or disturb in that sort of way. Paul says in the letter to the Ephesians, talking to that very mixed group of Christians, you should bear with one another in love. And you only have to bear with people you don't agree with. So you bear with one another and we will bear with you. Okay, fair enough. So Caroline, would you like to go first, please?
Thank you very much indeed. My name's Caroline Culver. I'm the Green Party candidate. I am currently a Green Party councillor in Ridgeway Ward, which covers 6 villages right up in the northwestern corner of this constituency. I was elected 5 years ago and I was re-elected last year with an increased majority. I've now got 69% of the vote there. So the Green Party are making inroads into this area. We have a reputation of being very, very hard-working and visible in the community. I'm also a flood warden, so I've been supporting my local residents who've been experiencing flooding from high groundwater this year, and that has caused sewage to come out into people's gardens and into the streets and so on. I am also chair of something called the Scrutiny Commission at West Berkshire Council, where we challenge the leadership of the council, their policies, their decisions and so on. So it's a little bit like a select committee in the House of Commons without sounding too sort of overblown about it. But it performs a similar role of offering that challenge to the council leadership. And we look at all kinds of issues, one of which we invited Thames Water and the Environment Agency to come to speak to us last October and be held accountable for what's been going on with the sewage discharges, and we will be inviting them to come back again later this year. It's obviously a really, really complex issue and it affects people all the way down the Pang Valley. Obviously we in the Green Party are very concerned about climate change as well. That's central to our agenda, but so too is social justice. We have been setting up community cafes around the area. We are obviously concerned about the cost of living crisis and we've been helping out residents with that. When we had the COVID pandemic, I supported volunteers across my 6 villages who were helping the elderly and vulnerable to get their shopping and any other kind of support that they needed. So very, very focused on the local area, and obviously we're conscious that this constituency is very rural and very urban, so I want to try and make sure that I address the concerns of both of those areas.
Please don't go on this long next time, thank you. Right, Kate, please.
No, she's not here.
Not you, right. Okay, yes, right, Kate is gone, right. So Ross, please.
Hello everyone, lovely to be with you today. My name's Ross McKinnon. I am the Conservative candidate in the election. I'm not from around here originally, don't let the accent fool you. I've lived in Berkshire for about half my life and in Burfield Common for the last 10 years. I live there with my wife and 4 children. I'm currently leader of the opposition on West Berkshire Council, so I know Caroline and Adrian pretty well. We were all elected at the same time 5 years ago. Before the electorate decided that our services were no longer required last year, I was in charge of finance at the council as well. So I had the dubious pleasure of being the guy that signed the leaflet when you got your council tax bills. So I'm sorry about that, but it would have been higher under the opposition. That's all I was going to say. Why did I get involved in politics? I wanted to really give a little bit back to my local community. I've always been a bit of a political nerd ever since I was a teenager. You know, I was the sort of 13-year-old that stayed up all night to watch the 1992 election. And remarkably, I did have more than a handful of friends, despite that fact, which was quite nice. And I went to university. I grew up in Glasgow. I went to university in Edinburgh. Then I moved down south in 2000. And politics was always something I was going to get involved in next week or next month. But, career and family got in the way until I finally joined the Conservative Party in 2017. I was on holiday and I read something that annoyed me and I thought, right, that's it, I'm going to fix this. So I decided in a fit of anger to do it. My main passion is social mobility. I grew up in a working class mining village in Lanarkshire as a supporter of Mrs Thatcher. There weren't too many of us back then, so I think I've got resilience, certainly on my CV. But what I want to make sure is that regardless of where you're from, what your culture is, what your race or religion or your background, there should be no barriers preventing you to succeed. That's what I get into politics, and I believe the Conservative Party is that party of aspiration. So it's lovely to be with you today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Ross, please.
Sorry,
Ross. I
can do another 2 minutes if you want.
Sorry, let's try Helen then, shall we?
Thank you, Michael. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out this afternoon. It's a rare sunny one, so I appreciate your sacrifice. I'm Helen Belcher. I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate for Reading West and Mid Berkshire. I'm a local girl. I was born in Battle Hospital when it was a hospital, not a Tesco's. When I was 7, family moved to Berfield Common, and my father was sadly carried out of that house 5 years ago when he died after living there almost 50 years. So that's the connection. I personally have bounced around the country a bit. I lived near Glasgow for 4 years. And yes, Ross was absolutely correct. Back in the 90s, where were the Conservatives? It was a very interesting time indeed. Yeah, my other half ran after somebody once and saying, really, gosh, there is one of you. And lived in Leeds as well for a few years. But most of my life I've lived in this central Berkshire area. We were asked to come up with something we would do locally and something we would focus on nationally. So, and actually for me the two are quite combined. Locally, we've got a situation where the Royal Berkshire Hospital is quite constrained in terms of its site. It's busy, it's difficult to get to, even by public transport. They are looking at relocating it, and the sites that they're looking at are on the other side of the town to us. So I've already asked them about, could we put a local site for clinics in the west side of the area, maybe Tilehurst, maybe Pangbourne, maybe Thiel, along the lines of the Townlands Hospital in Henley or Brant's Bridge in Bracknell, so that local people have less far to go and there's a greater level of healthcare on our doorstep. And the national one, I first started voting Liberal in the 1980s because of two things. One is fair votes, making seats match votes, and the other one was the environment. And back in the 80s, it was all about polluting. We need to sort out the pollution which is going into our rivers and our lakes and our beaches. We've really got to push that. It affects us in this seat as well. Burfield and Mortimer have huge problems with ongoing sewage leaks, but the Thames as a whole is a real problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Right. Adrian, please.
Thanks very much. Hi, everybody. My name's Adrian Abs. I am one of 2 independent candidates. My name will be at the top of the ballot because it's A, B, B and something. Right, so very easy to find, just check it at the top. I am, as Ross has said, I'm a local councillor. Why am I even bothering to run? because actually I think party politics is completely broken. I can't tell the difference between the colours anymore, and I can't really believe any of the manifestos that come out. So I needed, in my head, to come along and say, all right, what can help fix the UK? Someone with a business head on that can add up and basically bring some common sense and business sense to the role. I can't promise to bring new policy forward because I'm an independent, but what I can promise to do is work with whoever's in charge and help them make the right policy. And that includes things like where the hospital should be. Helen mentioned the Reading Hospital. That is an important thing, but if you talk to the people and the business in the high street out there, their number one issue is the cost of parking, which you wouldn't think has anything to do with an MP, but actually it is to do with the MP because it's the funding of councils that means that they have to raise the parking. So actually one of the things I'm really interested in doing as your MP that will help locally is figuring out how we fund the councils properly so they can deliver the services that you want. And the other element of that is social care. So we all know we're going to need it sooner or later, and especially as we get older. So social care is key that we start funding it differently. Why? Because at the moment, the successive governments have dumped the responsibility down on the councils, but they're then forgetting to fund it properly. So until we change that, we won't really see a change to everything else. Everything else about me is on the internet. Yes, I'm an environmentalist, a bit like Caroline here. We work together in the minority party at West Berkshire Council, so people can get on, even if they're not on there. Well, I'm not in a party, but you are, but you get the idea. You can work together, you don't need to be shouting at each other, and that's what you'll get with me, someone wanting to work in Parliament for the betterment of the nation. In this leaflet, there's one available on the way out, is a plan, a vision for the future. I'll stop there because he's just told. Oh, sorry, one last thing. My socks, apologies. I was leafleting all day, they're the wrong colour. I'll get it right next time.
Liv.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And hello, everybody. It's really lovely to see you. I'm Olivia Bailey. I'm the Labour Party candidate and really proud to be standing here in my home seat. I live in Tilehurst, down the road with my two boys who are really desperate for the election campaign to be over now, and with my wife. All together of us are working really hard to try and get to the finish line. But yes, and my dad was a local policeman in Thames Valley as I was growing up and in Reading. My mum was a local secondary school teacher. I was born in the Royal Berks, and first and foremost I'm motivated to stand because I want to represent my community, the community that I love and the community that I feel has been let down over 14 years of sort of chaotic Conservative government. A bit about me. So by trade, I'm a policy researcher, so I've worked in think tanks and public opinion research agencies. And I was very proud to work for Keir Starmer over the last 5 years as his head of domestic policy as we navigated through the COVID pandemic and developed policies for our manifesto. So I hope to think that my local passion, my local knowledge, plus my national experience means that I will be able to get things done if I am elected here locally. And of course, in this constituency, this is one of the seats which Labour must win to form a government. And, with a Labour MP locally and a Labour government nationally, there are so many wonderful things that we can do for this community. And so my local priority is the NHS. So I have been campaigning for a new Royal Berkshire Hospital to be built, and Rachel Reeves, I'm thrilled to say, has committed that if a Labour government is elected, if we win here, we will have a new Royal Berkshire Hospital that has the modern facilities and technology that we need. We'll also have more GP appointments. We'll end the 8 a.m. scramble that we are all currently facing. We'll have more dentistry appointments in our NHS. These are fully costed plans that a Labour government with a Labour MP locally can deliver. And then nationally, I think my priority has got to be the economy. This is the first Parliament on record where living standards are worse at the end than they were at the start. And we are all feeling the pinch in this cost of living crisis. So a Labour government's going to stabilise our economy and get it growing again. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you can probably tell from my accent I was Welsh. I was born in 1943 in Cwm Vale, which was the consistency of a Nair in Bevan. My grandfather didn't go to war, he was one of Bevan's boys. In other words, he went down the pit to get coal for our Navy. In 1944, when I was 1, he was in the pit on his knees in a 4-foot seam with a pick and shovel. It collapsed on him and all the men in it. He was rushed to hospital, had wonderful treatment. It didn't cost a penny because he was part of the Tredegar plan. And under the Tredegar plan, each miner and each steelworker paid a certain amount in each week and had total health care free for them and their families. It was on the Tredegar plan that an Iron Baron built the NHS. But the Tredegar plan was getting bigger and bigger and was running into financial and administrative problems. Mr. Williams, would you like to ask the first question, please?
Yes.
Could you use that microphone, please? Thank you.
Yes. Good afternoon. I'm Clive Williams. It follows on Mike's point. It's to do with the NHS. Following the Second World War, the Dutch government did a survey of all the demands on the Dutch state, and they concluded that health alone would absorb the entire gross national product for Holland. So for health, they basically provided a basic service, and then people had to contribute on a means-tested basis. And that was the model followed by all our European friends. Only in the UK did we go down the taxation-only model. Since then, there's been a dramatic increase in the cost of healthcare. We're all living longer. I'm 86 today. I was in the Royal Berks a month ago having a stent put in, you know. But, you know, people were dying at 67 at the Second World War. And the other thing is also the cost of care. I had a stent, you know, just put in as a routine. We recently saw the statue of Eric Morecambe at the front at Morecambe. He died at 58 of heart failure. He'd have been alive today. He'd have lived another 20 years today because he'd had a stent put in and he survived. So, you know, tremendous increases in costs. And I come to the conclusion that, in fact, the model in this country is broken. And we've got to change it. And I just think we've got to look at what's happening on our European neighbours. That's my view. And I'd like to know whether the candidates agree, and if they agree, what they're going to do about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Put it down there, please. Okay, thank you. Helen, please.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. It's an interesting question. I'm not sure I entirely agree because we see that the NHS budget is still a fraction of our taxation take rather than the whole lot. And I think part of its basis is healthcare needs to be free at the point of need. And there are many, many benefits to that. Now, the Dutch system that you outlined and many other European systems do that, but health needs themselves are becoming more complex, as you point out. So there's a question, if you start segregating it out and saying you need to pay after a certain level or you need to pay for certain treatments, we kind of already have that at the moment with things like the privatisation of optical care and dental care. And that causes problems. We see with dentistry, where I think we've got one NHS dentist clinic in this entire constituency, which sees adults. The standard of dental health treatment, the standard of dental health in our population as a whole is declining because it becomes an optional expense. And actually dental health is really key to picking up other health problems as well. So I don't necessarily agree with the basic premise of the model, because we have privatised certain aspects and that causes problems. But there is a problem about growing healthcare costs. But some of that is also because we don't tie it into social care. So when I was little, we had convalescent homes where people who were well enough to leave hospital but not well enough to look after themselves could go. So that might be an example to try and reduce the costly health beds which are occupied by recovering people while still providing good care so they can recover well.
Thank you. Thank you. Liv, please.
Yeah, I think I don't think we need a new model, but I do think the NHS is in a terrible state. And I think that it is one of the most precious things that we have as a country. It's one of our proudest achievements. And healthcare free at the point of use, and we must do whatever is necessary to defend and protect our NHS. And that is what a Labour government will do. That means investment, which we have got a costed plan to do to deliver 2 million more appointments in the NHS across the country, 40,000 more a week. Building the new hospitals that have not got out the door under the Conservatives. But it also means reform. It means significant reform of how our NHS is operating, because we have too many staff leaving. There's very, very, very low retention because the work's not flexible enough. We have loads of problems that have not been resolved following COVID, the flow through and the productivity through hospitals which need resolved. And there are, I think, too many people in middle management in the NHS who are not directly and most effectively contributing towards patient care and the speed of patient care. So we need investment and reform, and that's a really, really important thing. But I also think we need a complete shift in how we approach healthcare in this country towards prevention. That starts with our young people and getting access to sports and making sure that our young people are the healthiest generation that there has ever been. But it also means investing in modern scanners and technologies and the different ways that we can keep people healthy, keep them out of hospital. And of course it does mean too building towards a social care system that's fit for purpose so that we can keep people at home with their loved ones, and then when they need them, plenty of spaces in a fully operating social care sector so that we can get people through hospitals, treat them well, keep them healthy early. And Labour's got a fully costed plan to do that. When Labour was last in government, patient satisfaction was at its highest level and waiting lists were down. The reverse has happened under the Conservatives. Labour can always be trusted with the NHS, and it is a Labour government that is going to get our NHS back on its feet.
Thank you. Adrian, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. You stole some of my thunder there.
Sorry.
It's terrible. Yeah, of course. If we're going to tackle the problems of the NHS going forward, prevention is much better than trying to cure. It's a lot cheaper. So where do we start? Well, we have to start with food. We have to start with exercise. We have to start with the education piece. We have to start when you're really young. Because if you don't start and don't have the right ethic when you're really young, therefore when you get older, those issues that are going to face us all as we get older come sooner. And that's costly to fix. And I think we all believe in human life and the sanctity of it. So if we are going to be around as long as we possibly can and as long as medicine can allow us to be, then we need to make sure that the load on the NHS is minimised as much as possible. So how do you go about sorting out some of those things? It's going to sound a bit odd, but you start with energy. You'll have to bear with me, I'm probably not going to have enough time. If you start with energy, that will go down and will affect farming. Farming will mean that we can have healthier lifestyles. We can have the right type of space heating that's necessary. We can get rid of the things in the atmosphere that are hurting people through changing the transport fuels that are used. There are so many things that if we nibble away at them, starting with energy, leads to greater outcome. Now we're left with an NHS that tackles the real problems, not the problems that are self-imposed, but they're actual problems that have come about through no fault of your own. So that's how I would start. There's a lot more I could say. Have I got time to go around a little bit longer? No?
You've got 10 seconds.
I didn't think I had much longer. So retained skills I'll finish with. Olivia's right on that point. Look at emigration, not immigration. That's the number that scares me because it's the skill set that's leaving. Housing and actually having councils fulfill the housing needs of the people, like the doctors and nurses, is a way of retaining the skills as well. So it's a very holistic view of everything. So I shall sit down because he's coughed again.
Thank you. Ross, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Now I'm going to stick to the brief. Michael said that we should be looking to the future and not be bashing the other parties. So I'm going to stick to that.
I was very restrained.
And Olivia's already had a little dig at the Conservatives.
I was very restrained.
And all that I'm going to do in terms of picking people up is based on what they say. Now, Helen mentioned that it was a fraction of our spending. The NHS is about 20% of all government spending, and it's getting much, much higher. And, Olivia mentioned 2010, and she's quite right. The patient satisfaction scores in 2010 were the highest they've ever been. They're not as high as that now. The only problem was with the NHS in 2010, it was very badly performing on one, I think, a key measure, which was keeping people alive. And it's now much better at that. And I think keeping people alive is more important, perhaps, than patient satisfaction. Not that patient satisfaction is not important. And it's very easy to sit and complain about the NHS budget. The NHS budget now is 40% higher than it was 14 years ago in 2010. That is after the effects of inflation. So Mr. Williams is quite right when he draws attention to the fact that more and more money is being poured into the NHS, and yet waiting lists are getting higher. Now, I think we're in a slightly artificial situation at the moment because COVID has a long tail, and the amount of procedures which had to be postponed during those couple of years, and we know what a tough time it was, we're still dealing with that backlog. So I would suggest it is an artificially poor comparison to compare the waiting list now with 2010, and as I said, keeping people alive is more important. However, as a Conservative, I am absolutely committed to the principle of healthcare being free at the point of use to those who need it. And I'm not going to sit here and depart from my party policy on that, despite the fact that some people might be tempted for me to do so. So, no, I don't think the model is broken. I think the way that the money is spent, given that it's 40% more than I said that it was in 2010, needs to be looked at. I think in any organisation, and the NHS employs 1.6 million people. It is the third largest employer in the world. And of course, any organisation like that will always be inefficient, and it could be better. So I can see out of my peripheral vision, I'm about to be shut up. So no, the model's not broken, but it does need reform, but not along the lines the way that Olivia and Helen said.
I think in 1962, the age at which you're most likely to die was between 0 and 1. In 2022, the most likely age to die is 87 to 88. I've got 6 more years, Clive. How many have you got? Bishop should be here for the second question. He's not. Oh, sorry. I missed you out. Sorry. Sorry, Kate.
Caroline.
No, I get it right. Carolyn, sorry.
I agree that with some of the other panellists who said that it should be free at the point of entry. I think the NHS is one of this country's proudest achievements. My mum served in the NHS for more than 30 years as a midwife. We published our manifesto earlier this week, and we said that we would invest an extra £8 billion a year in the first year of the next Parliament if we were elected in the NHS, and that would go up to 28 billion by 2030. And we would also invest an extra 20 billion in infrastructure as well, so in the buildings, for example, and the renovation. And it's quite interesting, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, which is by no means left-wing, said that our plan is credible. And what they actually said about the Conservative and Labour plans is that they basically think that they are part of a conspiracy of silence. They are not being honest about the investment that is needed in the NHS in the future. And I think if anyone is to vote for the Labour Party, they need to go into that with their eyes wide open. The Nuffield Trust said just today in the media that they... sorry, beg your pardon. I had a bit of an early start today. In the Observer, there was a story basically saying that they have compared what the Labour Party want to spend with what was spent during the austerity years, and it will be no better. So no better than the spending between 2010 and 2014. So I very much want to see something different to the last 14 years, but I very much fear that we are not going to see a much better situation after this election, unfortunately. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
As I say, Graham Bishop was to be here to ask the next question, also on national health. He was been on the waiting list for a hip operation for a long time, and they phoned him up on Thursday, said, can you come in on Saturday? So he's chosen a hip operation instead of being here. But he's watching on Zoom, perhaps. Now, the interesting question about Zoom is it is possible to put this onto YouTube afterwards. Do any of you object to it going on YouTube? You're all happy with it? You're all happy with it, okay?
Depends how we do. Depends how we do.
Well, you're doing all right. Aren't they doing all right? Graham's question was this: a very large and growing public organisation like the NHS may be difficult to control. Has the time come to redevelop the NHS by restructuring into smaller units, partly funded by employee health insurance. Adrian.
No, nobody's ever posed that idea to me before, so on the surface it doesn't sound too bad an idea, to be honest. Why not? I think for me, almost the whole of the NHS needs a rework from a basis of who is designing the processes that are involved in it. And what I'd much rather see is the processes designed by the experts. And I'm sure if I ask the audience, you all know who the experts are. It's the doctors and the nurses, isn't it? So whether they would then recommend community hospitals coming back and break up in that kind of way, I would look to lean on their expertise, because they are the experts. And I think, you know, how it's paid for is always the million-dollar question. What I was going to answer it when I read the question was, we have an awful lot of private health going on in the UK, and certainly to get rid of the backlogs, we are doing, and we should lean more on it. I mean, there's Circle hospitals around here, and it's used regularly to try and mop up the backlog on the local NHS waiting list. So for me, sounds like a reasonable idea. Let's ask the doctors and nurses, the experts, and then build a model that actually works going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Caroline, please.
Thank you very much. It's a new question to me as well. It's something that I would certainly want to go away and look into in more detail. I did recently chair something called a Task and Finish group at West Berkshire Council, looking specifically at healthcare and new developments. People are very concerned about new housing estates not having big enough doctor surgeries, for example, to deal with the residents that are there. And one of the interesting thing about these groups is that you learn a lot very quickly about very complex issues. So, for example, in the NHS, they now have integrated care boards, and they are not actually allowed to hold assets. So they are not allowed to own a doctor's surgery, for example. It's up to the GP to either own or rent the building. So that makes it incredibly complicated. So one of the things we discussed with the local NHS Integrated Care Board and with the officers at the council and also with local developers was the need to look at having community hubs in the future. So this would basically involve the NHS and local councils and local housing developers working together to provide a building. So ideally to do it early on in the development of a new housing estate, not at the end once everyone's moved in and they're still waiting for their doctor's appointments. So actually get together, work out how to fund it, build it, staff it, and make sure it's up and running early on in the development of a new housing estate. So that's a very, I can't answer your question specifically, I would want to go away and have a look at that in more detail, but that hopefully is a useful answer about what I've been involved in. I've learned a lot about the NHS, and hopefully the recommendations of that report that I chaired will be useful to the West Berkshire area.
Thank you, Caroline. Ross, please.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks, Mr. Bishop, for your question. The NHS is it's a gargantuan organisation. As I said, it employs 1.6 million people. Any organisation that size is going to be, by definition, very difficult to control. It is organised into regional units and trusts, so there is, I think, a necessarily regional and local breakdown of this. I'd be quite wary. I know what Adrian was saying there about asking the doctors and nurses about how the NHS should be organised. I'd be quite concerned about that, actually. Yes, doctors and nurses are experts, and they should be experts. They should be experts in treating patients. I don't expect a doctor or a nurse to be an expert in management or organisation or process control, nor would I want them to be. NHS managers are a convenient whipping boy and whipping girl. We need them. We need good ones. And a hospital without those managers will not function very well. So, yeah, let's ask the doctors and nurses, but let's not ignore those management experts that do already exist in the NHS. This question has completely caught me cold, as I'm sure it has everyone. My first instinct on it is that it might not be as efficient as it sounds. So employee health insurance, if anyone is fortunate enough to have private health insurance with their employer, you'll know how it works. You have an ailment, you call up the number, and you get authorisation for treatment at a private hospital. Mm-hmm. That would appear to be by far the most efficient way of doing things, and actually having those people being put through the NHS would seem to needlessly clog up the system and probably add to waiting lists. As a Conservative, you will not be surprised to hear me say that I have no problem with private healthcare existing. I have no problem with private schools existing, which might come up a little bit later on as well. You never know. But that does not mean that I don't demand and expect that the national state provision should be of a good standard. That is absolutely not the case. So I am sceptical about this one, but who knows, I've been wrong before.
Thank you, thank you. Right, Liv?
Thank you. No, I don't support any change to the way that the NHS is funded and structured, and I worry about any creeping privatisation into the NHS, which I would be concerned that this would lead to. But I think that the way we need to think about this question is really, the NHS is about interactions with people, right? It's about, you know, the guy who I was talking to on the doorstep who's 83 who can't get a GP appointment, or the person I was talking to the other day who was really worried and waited 6-7 hours for an ambulance to arrive, or who is languishing on a waiting list that is far too long, and then gets to a hospital where the care in the ward is changing because the nurses are not consistent on the ward because they're all underpaid and undervalued and are leaving the profession. And then they're going into an operation theatre where the roof's dripping on them, right? The individual's experience of the NHS is where a Labour government would start, where I would start. And we have to absolutely reform our NHS. We absolutely have to reform our NHS. But the reform I want to see is one which puts the patient first, which means that we are no longer in fear when we get ill, which I fear is the reality in this country today. So we're going to have to change that. A Labour government is going to change that. And as I said earlier on, that is investment in these more appointments, it's building a new hospital, but it's also having a proper root and branch think about how we conduct ourselves in the National Health Service. But I think that going into new funding models is a total red herring.
Thank you very much. The NHS is obviously dear to our hearts. I had some other questions on it, but I think we need... Have I forgotten somebody again? Oh, dear, oh me, I'm so excited. Go on, Helen.
It's lovely to see Michael so keen to get on and push us through. So, again, it is an interesting question, but the NHS already subcontracts out large numbers of its services to private bodies. So I talked about opticians, for example, dentistry. General practitioners are also generally private businesses commissioned by the NHS. So you don't pay your general practitioner in the same way if you get, like I do because of my family's history of glaucoma, I get free eye checks. I don't pay for my eye checks, the NHS pays for them, even though it's a private optician. So the NHS is already kind of structured in the way that it's proposed. The additional question about sort of partly funded by employee health insurance, if you look at the current hospital waiting list, it's about 7.6 million now. It's gone up in the last month. The number of working age is 2.5 million on that waiting list. And that indicates the level of health need in the older or not working population compared to the working population. So if it's funded by employee health insurance, what happens if you're not an employee? What happens if you run your own company, you're self-employed? So there would be a raft of particular issues around that. And finally, management has come up. One of my very good friends has been a cardiology consultant over in Bedfordshire. He's actually just retired. And his big beef for years has been that the way the NHS has parcelled things up. And so he's asked to consider cardiology in isolation when it's actually linked to many other conditions. So we need to change that management structure, but not in a wholesale way as was done in 2012.
Thank you, thank you. As I was saying, the NHS is very dear to all our hearts. As you can see, I had many other questions on it, but those two are probably the typical ones. This is a very different question, which Jackie Ricks-Brown, if you'd like to take the microphone, please, Jackie, and ask this question 3, which you can open, please. Thank you.
Is it switched on? No. It's not right. I must admit, I was trying to think of something nobody else... I was trying to think of what other people wouldn't ask, and really looked about me and said, what's wrong with this country where people are telling lies all the time, being unkind to other people, and generally not sticking to the sort of principles that we saw in the country, say, just after World War II. So my question is, the values of our country, to which most of us feel committed, are based on Christian principles, and we're known as a Christian country. We seem to be drifting away from these as values as a country. This is not due to becoming multicultural or multi-faith. Those are good things, and in fact most of the other cultures and faiths agree with those basic principles, some of them sticking to them better than we do. But it's because the increasing me first attitude that everyone is developing. I remember getting up to offer my seat to people on the bus. Doesn't happen much now I'm over 70. How would your party seek to restore the values to which most of us aspire?
Jackie, put the microphone there, please. Ross, would you like to take this first, please?
Yes, I would love to. That's a fantastic question. Young people sometimes get a bad press, don't they? And, you know, Miss Ricks Brown, I think I totally understand where you're coming from there. I think the first thing to say is that it's not all young people. I mean, my daughter's nearly 17, and I look at her and I'm so proud of her. She's respectful. She'd be the first to jump up and offer her seat up on the bus. I can guarantee you that. But, you know, I was baptised in the Church of Scotland. I don't know if there's any Presbyterians in the room, but you'll know it's a slightly different looking church to what we have here. Basically, the Church of Scotland says that if the church looks too nice, then you're doing something wrong. You will sit on that hard cushionless bench and you will enjoy it, is what happens. My wife is a Catholic, and when we first explored getting married to each other, we did a deal. Now, I support Glasgow Rangers Football Club, and if anyone knows much about Scottish football, you'll know that there aren't too many Catholic Rangers supporters for historical reasons. But we did a deal, and my wife and I agreed that she got the religion and I got the football team. So my two young boys are baptised Catholic, but they're both Rangers supporters, and I think they're one of the few in there. To come to the question, I think it is not in the gift of my party to restore those values, I'm afraid. I'm not going to sit here and say that a government can do that on its own. I'm afraid it is much more incumbent on parents to bring up their children with the respect and the attitudes that they would like to pass on. So I'm not going to promise anything that I can't do. I would say that the recent announcement from the government about national community service, I actually think is quite welcome. I went to bed early when Rishi made that announcement, so I didn't see it. And I woke up on the Sunday morning and my phone was on fire about us bringing back conscription, which is clearly not the case. It's much more of a community-based element than an armed forces, which is voluntary and is likely to be oversubscribed. For people like my daughter, it's not required. She already volunteers and she already gives of her time more than anything else. But I think that's a small step along the road. I think any government, any party which makes the government, I don't think it's an easy fix. I think politicians need to have integrity and they need to really live those values and demonstrate those values. And I think politicians of all parties perhaps have not done that over the last few years. So if I'm elected as your MP, I'll certainly seek to lead by example and do what I can.
Okay. Helen, please.
It's an interesting question. Thank you for it. One of the things I constantly get confronted with, or regularly get confronted with on doorsteps, is people looking at me and going, "Oh, not another bloody politician, you're all the same. You're all in it for yourselves." And it makes my heart sink every time it's said. And I can understand why people feel that, because we've had a while of politicians in certain parties driving their own agendas. I mean, I think one of the most shameful things was lying to the Queen about proroguing Parliament, as an example. We're not all the same. For me, it's about modelling values. I'm really proud that Liberal Democrats, as a party, their core value is working with people. It's listening to people, it's valuing the individual, whilst ensuring there is a safety net, there is a community around people. So it enables people to fulfil their full potential. I think there's also something here about what the press reports, and part of my history is campaigning for press reform. I gave evidence of the Leveson inquiry back in 2012 on press standards and ethics. I'm not averse to telling powerful people like the editors of the Mail and the Sun exactly what they're doing wrong and raising questions about that. So there's the way that this is reported and the agendas which are at play within the national press. So as Lib Dems, we would want to implement the full findings of Leveson, proper regulation, encourage diverse media ownership. But it is about, again, fundamentally modelling the behaviours that we want to see. And most people get it. Most people share those values. So it's a very small number of people, really, that are causing those problems.
Thank you. Caroline, please.
Thank you. I very much agree with what Helen has just said about politicians. Many of us here are councillors, and we're working incredibly hard for our local communities, supporting people every day with all kinds of challenges that they face. The Green Party are very much a party of community and a party of social justice. As I mentioned earlier, we had lots of COVID volunteers locally who I helped to support during the pandemic. We actually had more volunteers than we needed to help the vulnerable, so it did my heart good to see how many people came forward and really, really wanted to help. When we had the cost of living crisis, we helped to set up a series of local community cafes. So we had a big community meeting in St John's Church in Newbury, and as a result of that, several cafes were set up, which are still running now. So we, as Greens, myself and my colleague Steve, who's standing in Newbury for the Green Party, attend those regularly. St John's Church every Friday has a soup lunch where people can come along who may be living in poverty or may be feeling isolated. They might have mental health challenges and they just want to be with other people. So we actually go along and we volunteer to make sure that those run. Another thing that we've been doing recently is supporting mosques as well. Steve has been celebrating Eid with some of the Islamic community who are very, very concerned and feel very fragile at the moment with what's happening in Gaza. There's been an increase in Islamophobia. And again, we cannot judge everybody by the actions of a small group like Hamas. There's a problem with anti-Semitism as well, and we need to address that. So we're very much a party of the community and also working with all churches, people of all faiths and none, to make sure that we support the vulnerable in our society. And I'll just make one caveat to that. I'm very conscious that a lot of things these days people are expected to volunteer to do, whereas years ago you might have received some payment. And I do worry that we put more and more pressure onto individuals to volunteer for the church and the communities, the community cafes, maybe driving people to hospital, and people can feel that they're doing more and more and more, whereas back in the day some of those jobs might have been paid. So I would just say there's a caveat there. There are really important community and social jobs where people should actually be paid a proper wage to do them.
Okay, thank you. Adrian, please.
Yeah, thank you. Well, the question was, how do we bring Christian values back really to society? And the thing called the Nolan principles exist. You've all watched the TV, you've all seen The Chamber. They are supposed to show respect for each other. They're supposed to follow the Nolan principles. How do you start bringing some of those values back into society? You stop doing what they do in the Chamber day in, day out, and on the telly day in, day out. And it's not going to sound very nice, and I'm going to excuse Caroline from this comment that I'm about to make because I've never seen her party do it. But if I look at just the leaflets that you're receiving through the post, has anybody seen the Labour one and the Lib Dem one? And do they both have bar charts saying how they're the only ones that can win here, vote for me, we're the only ones that can beat the Conservative? Well, which one's lying? Because one of them's got to be, right? It can't possibly both be true. So let's get a bit of reality. Let's start taking the lack of the conspiracy of silence, which is what it is actually going on. We have to have a leaflet. If you look at my leaflet, there's not one thing in there that's not the truth. Okay? Truth according to me, yes. And I don't mean Meghan Markle's my truth. Truth how that can be proved through physics, the whole... It's not that bad, Ross. But you get the idea. How do we start rebuilding? People have to see us showing respect for each other. I absolutely pledge and promise you, you will not see me argue in the Chamber if you elect me. I will be there to work with and influence whoever is the administration, probably Liv's team. But that's it. That's where we start. Once we start having respect for each other again, some respect might return for the police. They've got a bit of work to do as well. But once we get along that path, society will reconnect with each other. At the moment, we're heading towards a massive breakdown in society because people are just not willing to say the truth, and I will, if necessary.
Thank you. Liv?
Thank you very much for the question, Jackie. So we are also a blended family in our household. I grew up in the Church of England. My wife's Catholic, our boys are Catholics. And what we teach them, and I think is the important thing for all young people, is you treat other people as you want to be treated yourself, and you do your bit to help people, and you do your bit to help those in need. Right? That's the foundation. That's why I'm in politics. It's what my parents taught me. As public servants, my dad was a policeman, mum was a teacher, and you do what you can to help the community around you. And I'm extremely proud of our country and the values that we have and the way that we stand together and be together and support those in need, especially in communities like this one. And I think that the COVID pandemic really showed what was so magical about that sense of community and community spirit that we have. That despite the fact that we couldn't be physically together, how much we came together as a country. And I'll never forget that. I think it gave me a real sense of pride in my country. But the COVID pandemic also showed some of the worst of us, right? And the hardest conversations that I have had to have on the doorsteps in this election campaign are people who told me about the sacrifices they made during COVID, losing loved ones during the crisis, and then watching on television that people had been having parties and breaking the rules. And I think that was catastrophic for trust in politics, for trust in the principles that hold our country together. And it's unforgivable in my mind. But I think what's got to come out of that is restoring, first of all, so three things. First of all, restoring integrity in politics. We've got to say the truth as we see it, not promise things that we can't achieve, and always conduct ourselves with the highest integrity, and that is 100% what I will try and do if I am lucky enough to be elected as your MP. But we've also got to think about, it's not just the state has a role in how we come together, how cohesive we are, right? And that starts in pride in our places. That starts in having our verges cut, having police on the street, having a sense of, I've gone in a roll, he stood up, I'll try and finish, having a sense of collective pride in the place that we live and restoring that, and also supporting our young people with youth clubs, which a Labour government will bring in here, but also, as I say, with police back on the street, and there's cops. I'll stop. I got carried away. Do excuse me.
Thank you. Okay, interesting question, difficult answers, and you did well, because it's a very good thing to sit and debate. Anyway, let's change the subject. The next question is number 4 from Deborah McGoldrick. Please, if you'd like to take the microphone. Thank you.
Hello. Have I got it in the right place? The microphone? Oh, okay. So my son attends a local primary school here in Tilehurst. He's currently in year 5 and in a class size of 33 students. He's autistic, however, does not qualify for an EHCP. Despite his teachers and the SENCO working incredibly hard, I do not believe my son receives the attention and support he requires to reach his full potential. If Labour comes into power on the 4th of July and VAT is added to private school fees, then class sizes in the state sector are set to rise, stretching staff and resources even further. If you are elected as our MP, how will you further support children with additional needs in schools here in Reading West and Mid Berkshire?
Thank you. Okay, then, you can go again.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for your question, Deborah. So I will just start by saying there is a lot of analysis. So private schools have been raising their fees consistently over the last decade, way above inflation. And there has been no increase in the number of kids into the state school system. So all of the analysis that we've used from the IFS and every assumption that we're making, which I absolutely believe to be true, will be that there will not be an additional strain on the state system through our policy of removing this tax break for private schools. And instead what this money is going to be used for is putting 6,500 more teachers in our schools, relieving the pressure, reducing class sizes, making sure that young people are getting taught by a specialist, so no more PE teachers taking maths lessons, but enough teachers to give our kids the best possible education, and also a fully trained mental health and SEND support worker in every school, which will make a huge difference. And I understand the importance. In my family, I have experience of these issues myself, and I understand how important good quality SEND support is in our schools. Kids who need that extra bit of help to get through the day, you know, the good teacher to pupil ratios, these things are absolutely critical. And Labour has a fully costed plan to deliver significant improvements in our schools, to support mental health, to support SEND. And, you know, I think that when there's not much money to go around, the economy's in a really difficult state, we have to make tough choices. And I personally think, and I will defend this policy because I think it's the right choice when there's not much money to go around. It's the right choice to say we will remove this tax break and put this £1.3 billion into our state school system, because state schools are stuck together with sticky tape at the minute. These fantastic teachers doing amazing work, but they need a bit of a boost. They need our backing, they need more teachers, and they need more support staff.
Thank you. Ross, please.
Thank you very much. Now, I said that I wouldn't sit here and bash the opposition, but this question is directly asking about the Labour Party policy. So I think this is the worst type, the worst kind of politics of envy. I really do. I do sympathise with Olivia having to sit here and defend it. It is simply not credible to say that if private school fees rise by 20%, you will not get kids whose parents simply can't afford it anymore coming into the state sector. That is clearly going to be the case. And it is almost like Jeremy Corbyn never went away, really. And it's surprising because the Labour Party, we are told, has moved away from that. It is really dreadful. Just harking back to Olivia's previous answer, you said that the COVID stuff was unforgivable. I think that's a bold statement in a hustings that's organised by a church. Nothing is unforgivable, really. And I wonder if Keir Starmer's beer and Currygate was what you were talking about. But no, I mean, certainly mistakes were made. All governments make mistakes. All people make mistakes. All oppositions make mistakes. On this, I don't really recognise the grim picture that Olivia paints. I don't send any of my children to private school. I'm very fortunate that our local schools in Burfield Common are absolutely brilliant. My 5-year-old goes to his local primary school, and they deal with special educational needs fantastically. In fact, there's, so I won't say what class they're in, but where you've got students with severe special needs, there's dedicated teaching assistants for that one teacher, for that one pupil. The question directly asked me, if I'm elected as an MP, what will I do to further support children with additional needs? I will absolutely bang that drum for you, is the answer. Because I don't ever want parents to be in your position saying that my child's not getting the support I think they need. I won't go into my personal circumstances too much, but I do have some experience about this. And I will be your most tireless advocate in backing you up on that.
Thank you. Thank you. Helen, please.
Thanks, Deborah. I agree with Ross that the local primary schools in Burfield Common are excellent. You're looking at the end product of some of them. I know that actually getting support, fighting for support for children with additional needs is incredibly difficult. And it has been for years, and it's getting harder. I also know, because I was a school governor in Wokingham for 8 years, that the impact that's the cuts to school budgets year on year on year have had by the reduction of choice, the reduction of support. And it's absolutely devastating for the children who do need more support. We do not support putting VAT on private school fields. And I suppose I ought to declare an interest because we put my daughter into a private school. It was a theatre school rather than a sort of more academic school for 3 years, partly because actually she wasn't coping with the kind of the changes to the curriculum that were coming through and the intense focus on testing that seemed to be coming through. And she came out of that with a lot more confidence back into the state system. But we do need to significantly increase resources in education, particularly in special needs. And I would support our party's measures to increased funding for local authorities so that there is better resourcing for those things, and establishing a new national body to specifically look at and fight for champion SEND as an issue. And I would support that. Education is one of my key things. I used to talk about the E's: equality, education, environment. That's what I would fight for. And you know, you have my undying support for fighting to get the absolute best for your children. And you're not alone. There are lots of people like you.
Thank you. Thank you. Adrian, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I don't suppose people were listening to Radio 4 yesterday afternoon by any chance. There was the programme and there were a whole bunch of people calling into that programme on this very subject. These were people that were at special needs schools. They were calling in private schools and they were saying, hey, we're going bust. So unfortunately, Olivia's assertion that all this money will just flow down into the coffers of the government, I'm afraid I'm with Ross, it's not going to happen. This can't happen because there's a misunderstanding of why certain people are in certain places. Another example would be someone coming back from working abroad with their children. They may not know the area at all. You know, therefore they're more likely to choose the private sector because they're not connected to the local community yet. They wouldn't know which is the right school. They can do some research online and this and the other. But they're just trying to do the best they possibly can for their children. And by the way, 20%, it's not a tax. It's not a tax break they're getting. It's not taxed in the first place. So I just don't understand this business. Next is the whole business of 6,000 teachers. Well, I don't know how many of you have got degrees in maths, physics, chemistry, or things of that nature. Bridget, thank you very much. I've got one of those as well. So if you look at where people go with those, some of them choose to go to teaching because that's the career they wanted. But most of them can go to the private sector at 2 or 3 times what on earth a school could even possibly afford to pay. So saying, well, we're going to get 6,000 teachers, are they going to come in from abroad? Because that's about the only place we could recruit them from. But let's go back to emigration again. No. Those teachers, those doctors, those nurses that are qualified, those are the ones that are emigrating. So it's all right as worrying about the immigration number, but I'm actually just as worried about the emigration number because the skills are going. So I'm afraid, I've no idea what the number would be, but it's certainly not 1.3 billion coming into the coffers. And by the way, to how you'd help how would help you directly, remember that thing I said about social care funding and making sure it's done properly? Because that's the provision starts through the West Berkshire Council or County Council. So they need to be funded properly to be able to provide it properly. Sorry.
My first
I thought you were just clearing your throat.
No, it's all right. My first degree's in maths and I can tell the time, you see.
Oh, there you go.
I think it's Carol's doing it.
Shall I go next? Yeah, thank you. Yes, so in West Berkshire Council we have something called the High Needs Block, which is SEND basically, and it's the area that's most likely to send us into bankruptcy, and I suspect that's the case for a lot of local councils. So the scrutiny committee that I mentioned, which I chair, is going to be looking at this topic every 6 months from now on, starting this September, to actually try and get a handle on the issue and see if there are any recommendations we can make for how the council handles it in the future. I'm not going to allow Olivia to take all of the flack over the VAT on fees. One of the straplines of my campaign is honesty, so I will be honest with you and say that we also support that policy of VAT on private school fees. And then I would just point out that the Green Party in the manifesto this week announced that we would boost education funding by 8 billion, including 2 billion for pay, because we believe one of the biggest challenges in the education sector is the pay. A lot of the staff are leaving and going to other roles. And my partner's sister works with special educational needs students and finds it an incredibly stressful job. There aren't the resources, there isn't the pay to incentivise the teachers to stay in that area of work. So I'm very, very mindful of the challenges faced in that area. Thank you for your question.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, let's have a direct question on this, shall we? Put them on the spot, Mr. Caddy. Thank you. You'd like to use the microphone.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Jeremy Caddy. I'm a retired head teacher. And in fact, in 1974, I was acting head at Park Lane School just down the road. But my concern is, it has already been touched upon, but it is specifically about the differences between private schools and state schools. I've spent 35 years in state schools, and during that time I had to struggle with dreadful buildings, oversized classes, and goodness knows what, taking up an inordinate amount of my time. So my question to the panel here is, if elected as our MP, would you seriously consider removing the charitable status of private schools, or at the very least charging them VAT? And having worked as a teacher for 35 years, and living in an area surrounded by private, extremely well-paid private schools, I feel it is so unfair for the majority of teachers and pupils in state schools to be regarded as second-rate citizens.
Thank you. Okay. Go on, Adrian, you can start on this one.
Did somebody clap?
Yeah, they do. No, right. Well, we've done the VAT just in the previous question, you know my position on that. The issue comes down to, it's not black and white, state versus private. There are different types of private school. So just to go carte blanche, I'll do this, isn't really the answer. Like almost everything in life, it's nuanced. And the nuance would come down to assessing those private schools. If you're talking to me about Eton, I think the people that can go there can afford it. If you're talking about a special needs school, I'm not so sure the parents can. So my answer is nuanced. It would be you'd have to investigate the various schools, and you might apply a slightly higher barrier to those that are purely there for profit against those that are delivering a need. But it's not black and white for me.
Okay. Liv, please.
The vast majority of children and young people in this country go to state schools. The vast majority, 93% more, I think. And I make no apologies for wanting every single one of those young people to have the very best. I want the best for everybody. I don't want state schools to be regarded as second rate, and I want the facilities to be good. I don't want crumbling concrete. I want them to have enough teachers. I want teachers to feel supported and like they're not, endlessly overstretched and burnt out, because I know how hard it is, because my mum was a teacher her whole life, and I saw how tough it can be, and I see what a huge service teachers give to this country. And, as I said earlier on, the economy is not in a good state. It is in a really poor state, and we are not making any promises in this election that we cannot afford to deliver. And I am proud, and I think it is the right choice. It is a tough choice, because I understand why parents want the best for their kids. Of course I do. But it is the right choice to say that we will remove this tax break for private schools and put it into the state sector. You want a government that's honest with you. You want a government that's going to make tough choices. And in this choice, we are saying we are going to get the very best for all of our young people, and make sure that they've got the teachers, the mental health support, the good quality buildings and playing fields that they deserve. And as I've said, consistently, when I'm asked with this question, private schools do not have to put this money onto parents. Private schools have been increasing their fees over and above inflation consistently, and that's a choice that they have taken. So I would just say to private schools, please don't put this cost on parents. You have no need to.
Thank you. Helen?
Firstly, Mr. Caddy, I salute you for doing 35 years teaching. I survived 2 as a maths teacher with a maths degree. I think there is a question for some private schools around, are they actually doing charitable work, or are they paying lip service to it? And I think that that's something which needs to be examined on a case-by-case basis. And so private schools which claim charitable status actively need to demonstrate the benefit that they are doing for the community. I'm concerned that there is too much lip service going on. We talked about the VAT aspect in the past. I think what we're in danger of doing is saying there's private schools and then there's state schools. There's actually another option, which is home education as well. And that also causes some issues, because what is the quality of education being provided for those children? And I think it is absolutely vital that we ensure that the state system is funded properly to give every child in it the best possible education with the best possible choices to enable them to fulfil their opportunities for life. Education is a public good. We invest in it for the benefit of our society now and in the future. And we invest in the individuals in order to enable them to live the best lives that they can as well. I would absolutely support the recognition of teachers as a valued profession. I think it has been significantly devalued over the past few years, to our shame as a country. You look at how teachers are treated elsewhere in the world, and it is with vastly more respect than teachers in this country. And I think, we need to make sure that that's what drives the need to fund education properly and give people the best opportunities we can.
Thank you. Caroline, please.
Thank you. Yes, I congratulate you on your service to the education system as well. I was an A-level teacher briefly, but I didn't even manage 2 years, Helen, so you did better than me. Yes, I support what you're saying. I think that the state sector has been treated like a second-class system. In the ward that I represent, we have the Down School, a secondary school, and they have a footpath which floods regularly. They have an outdoor playing area with a poor surface. They have a swimming pool that needs to be renovated. We have something called members' community bids, where councillors are allowed to apply for funding from a small pot of money at the council, and I've actually been applying for money from that pot to help top up the money that the local schools need, which shouldn't be necessary. But I've done that for some of our local schools and also for that secondary school as well. The rack concrete scandal was mentioned by one of the other panellists. That's just another example. And classrooms that are too cold, classrooms that are too hot. I mean, I could scarcely teach in the classroom that I was teaching in because we couldn't open the windows and the school boiler was on constantly and the room was horrendously hot. So I don't know how the students were expected to concentrate on their studies. So I agree with what you've asked. Thank you.
Thank you. Ross, please.
Thank you very much. The short answer to your question is no, and I think you won't be surprised to hear me say that. I would not seriously consider removing charitable status or VAT. I'll take issue with a couple of things that my colleagues have said. I agreed with almost everything Olivia said, actually, apart from the really important stuff. But you mentioned that private schools have been putting up their fees by more than inflation every year. Yeah, absolutely, because they've had to cover their costs. They're not doing this myth of sort of capitalist profit-making private school. It just doesn't exist. Private schools are mostly charities. Any surplus they make in terms of income and expenditure gets ploughed back into providing services for the pupils. I am not in the business of controlling people's lives. I'm going to say the S word. I'm not a socialist. If parents want to send their children to a school of their choice, if somebody wants to get treated at a private hospital of their choice, that's up to them. And it shouldn't be the business of government. And what Helen said about paying lip service to charitable activities, education is a charitable activity in itself. Education is a good thing. It's one of the 12 charitable activities that's actually specified in the Charities Act. So if a school is educating its children, it is performing a charitable purpose. And going back, this is kind of the opposite question to the one we had before almost. This is not just rich parents' kids going to private school. A lot of these kids in private schools have got special needs, and that's why they're going to private school. And I don't blame parents for being pretty terrified about the prospects for this policy. Going back to the VAT thing, Adrian's spot on. Not taxing something that has never been taxed in history is not a tax break, right? The government doesn't own all of your money apart from the bit that it chooses not to take. That is not the right way of looking at it. Okay, it's not a tax break. We're in danger of getting into class war here. And I think that's very, very dangerous indeed. So with respect, it's a no from me.
Thank you. Yes, most of the questions I received were on the national health and were on education. They are obviously the two big issues that affect many people. The first duty of government is to protect its citizens, and certainly in my lifetime I've been protected very well. So we haven't had any questions on the police or the armed services, but we do have another one from Leo White on local education. Leo, would you like to take it up? This really does, from what you heard what the candidates have said, affect them. So their job is national, but their job is also local. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Do I look here? So the direct question is, what will the candidates do to improve school bus services in West Berkshire? So to give some context, we have a situation, my youngest son goes to a school outside catchment. In fact, it's the Downs. We live in Purley. We'd like to get him just to and from school. West Berkshire has failed in being able to guarantee a bus place. So all the parents in our locality are now scrambling around trying to find bus services. And what that has meant is that the private sector has moved in. It's provided bus services, but at a premium. So directly, I'd like to know what you would all do to improve bus services so that parents can get their kids to and from school, let alone the classroom sizes, classroom states. We're talking about basic transport to and from school.
Thank you. Caroline, please.
Thank you very much indeed for your question, Leo. Yes, we definitely do need more places on buses. I'm conscious that the home to school transport is a really big chunk of the council funding, so it is a big challenge, like the high needs block with special educational needs as well. But I know that it is a really, really big challenge for a lot of the schools in my area. A lot of the students who go to the Downs come from across a very wide geographical area, and it's the same for most of the schools in the rural area. And this is one of the reasons that I'm concerned about this constituency. It's very, I fear that the rural area might be forgotten by the new Member of Parliament because they're very focused on Reading. So I would urge whoever wins this election to not forget about the rural areas, because we do face very, very real challenges out there. It's very difficult to get a place to go on the school bus. It's difficult to get an appointment at the local doctor's surgery because there's not enough doctors in the rural areas, and so on and so forth. So I very much agree, we do need more places. It's absolutely essential. Yeah.
Thank you. Helen, please.
Helen, was that? Yeah, okay, thanks. It's an interesting question, Leo, and I think what I've learnt over my business career as a systems analyst and then an owner of a software company which we ended up selling when it was based in Reading is to listen. My systems analyst thing is about listening and then developing pragmatic solutions. I don't know enough, I'll admit, I don't know enough about the specific issues facing school bus services around West Berkshire. I know that there are problems, because there are problems pretty much everywhere. But I would want to understand what the cause, the underlying cause of the problem is, and what solutions can then be developed to improve those services. So I'd be very happy to talk to you and then talk to other people who are responsible for commissioning and supplying those services to find out what the problem is and how can we overcome it. So I can't answer your question right now because you're asking a very definite question. I don't know enough, so I would want to listen and then think.
Thank you. Ross, please.
Yeah, there are only two possible answers to your question. And I think all of the candidates up here are going to give you a variation on the theme, but I'll keep it short and sweet. There are two things I would do for you. Firstly, is to badger the Department for Education to provide West Berkshire Council with more funding for school bus services. And then the second thing is to badger West Berkshire Council to provide your child with the bus that they should have. That is it. That's all the MP can do here. And I guess it's a question of which one of us up here can be the most annoying to the Department for Education and the West Berkshire Council. And I've got it on pretty good authority that I am by far the most annoying. So I would bang the drum for you.
I'm not sure about that.
They're the only two answers I can give you, but I would absolutely do it.
Thank you. Thank you. Liv, please.
I'm not sure if I want to get into a battle with Ross about being annoying or not. I can't decide if it's a good idea. But yeah, look, the answer is, you need an MP who's going to fight your corner, and that's what I would do in this case. If somebody came to me with an issue like that, it's a case of knocking heads together and making something happen. And I think that there's a really important role for a local MP, to do that. And look, I do worry a little bit that the Liberal Democrats in Newbury don't really focus on this end of the constituency. I hear it an awful lot on the doorsteps, the verges always seem to be cut last, and, they never seem to be around, and that's a big problem. And actually that's one thing that I think an MP for this constituency can really do, kind of pull together, create a real sense of place, and really advocate for the eastern part of West Berkshire in this part of the constituency, because I think they do get a raw deal quite a lot of the time. And the other thing that we'll do is provide secure longer-term funding settlements for local government. And that's something which Labour has said it will do. It's really, really important, because we can't forget, to give some credit to the various administrations who have been struggling in West Berkshire. There is a real lack of cash, and we've had lots of cutbacks just to kind of maintain the core services of the council, and I think that's a big problem. So, we've said we're going to put some investment back into councils, for example, to tackle the quality of our roads. There's so many potholes, we're going to get that sorted out, and we are going to deliver these long-term funding settlements for local authorities, which will hopefully over time enable us to restore things like school bus services with a local MP who's going to fight your corner.
Thank you. Adrian, please.
Yeah, thanks very much. First thing I'll do is go and have a chat with the portfolio holder next week. So I don't need to be an MP to do that. Any councillor can do it. So you could do it, in fact, and I encourage you to do it. Next, probably have a chat with Jeff Brooks, the leader of the council. He could run it by his executive and try and get something done about it. But knock on the doors and get the people. I think, did you say Purley-on-Thames, I think? Yeah. That's right. I believe that's Matt Shakespeare. He's usually pretty responding. Go and have a chat with him. Use your councillors, your West Berkshire councillors, to try and get what you need. Don't just rely on the officers. Get your councillors involved. So why am I saying all this? Well, obviously it shows some local knowledge because I'm a West Berkshire councillor. But I think more importantly, I want to demonstrate how I would be different as an MP. Because I want to stay absolutely rooted to this community. So in January, when I announced, the first thing I said I would do is go and meet all of the parish councillors. And I've managed now, if Rishi hadn't called the election early, I would have done it completely by the end of the summer, but I've missed one, I think it's Wolverhampton. Why am I doing that? Because they are the ones that you should be talking to day in, day out. And it doesn't matter whether it's Reading West or whether it's mid-Berkshire, the same is true. The only slight issue I've had, now Clive, did I see Clive here earlier? Clive earlier. I thought the Tylehurst Parish Councillor, he's chairman of that. He's part of the minority group of myself and Caroline at West Berkshire Council, right? He is the only councillor from Reading West to bother to respond. What did the others say? The ones that are Labour? Oh no, we're supporting Liv. This was back in January. And all the question is, could you tell us what the issues are? Or could you tell me what the issues are for this area? So whoever becomes the MP, hopefully me, but whoever becomes the MP, I would have collated them, and that's the job to be getting on with. That's what the local councillors have said. And it doesn't matter whether it's parish council or town council. I've also committed that I will go to district council meetings at least twice a year to stay connected. An MP doesn't have to stand off going, oh, no, that's not my responsibility. I don't want anything to do with that. They can get involved. And that's what I want to do. This constituency needs an MP that's for you, the area, and the constituency. Thank you.
We have 6 minutes left. We've got 1 minute each to answer this question. I don't understand the question. It's sent in by Simon Bird, who was going to be here, but as his Father's Day, his family's taken him away for the weekend. But his question is marriage the best form of social security? Make of that question what you will. Liv, would you like to start, please?
Sure that I would, no. Well.
Just 1 minute. Number 8.
My marriage is 100% my form of security, it provides me great comfort and resilience and a stable base to sort of, fight in election campaigns and have a career and have kids and bring them up the best way I want. But it's but I don't think it's the only way to have stability, and I don't think it's the only way to have social security. I think everybody can choose to live their lives in the way that they want. They have a right to have a social security system that catches them if they fall, and we will stitch the holes in that net that have been created under this government. You know, I support people's right to live their lives as they want, free of discrimination, and that's my answer.
Thank you. Well done. You kept your minute. Well done.
Thank
Great.
you.
Adrian, 1 minute, please.
Yeah, well, being married, she certainly looks after me. During this campaign, if she wasn't there to support me, it would be a hell of a lot harder. Is it the best form of social security? I think having someone there to support you, whether it's your wife or whether it's your partner, you know, we all need someone that we can lean on. And the more that we can encourage that, then yes, that is the best form of social security, to have someone that you can talk to daily. And I really enjoy being married, so I think it is really good social security.
Adrian, please.
No,
that was
again.
Caroline. Yeah, have another go.
Have another go.
Caroline.
I didn't like my first answer, I'll try again.
I'm not married and I never have been, but I do value the family, the wider family, and I think that's one of the most important things to life. I also think that central to security and stability is the freedom from want, the freedom from poverty, and I think that's something that MPs in the House of Commons can make sure that we build a society where people are free from poverty, and I think that's one of the most important things we could do. And I also think essential to our security and stability is the NHS, one of the greatest institutions that this country's ever seen, and which we know is there for us if we are ever ill. And when we are ill, that's the time when we're most fearful. Hopefully we have a family around us to look after us, but the NHS is there for us. So I think all of those things are essential.
Thank you. Ross, please.
Thanks very much. I agree very largely with what Olivia said. Now, I know your wife's in the audience, so I don't know if you had to say all that.
I know, I would have said it anyway.
But
I would have said it anyway.
my wife is not in the audience, but it will get back to her because a lot of my friends are. Is marriage the best sort of social security? Yes, it is for me. My wife is wonderful. She's an absolutely wonderful support to me. She's a rock. And I can't imagine not just this election campaign, but you're absolutely right, it is stressful, isn't it? But just getting through life's day-to-day challenges, it's great, and I hugely value it. But it's not for everyone. And, you know, Caroline's quite right. Your friends, your family. I think it's important for everyone just to have that support group, to have that bubble. And it does make me reflect that I know that for whatever reason, some people don't have that. And I guess that's when things like social work and councils have to step in. So marriage works so well for a great many people. I think what's important is that people are just supported by whoever, those important people in their life. And we certainly shouldn't be stigmatising people, for instance, who don't choose to get married. But speaking personally, I couldn't do without it.
Helen, please.
Yeah, thank you. A very interesting question. Like Ross, my wife isn't here, but probably unlike Ross, it's because she's undergoing a medical procedure today. So she might not think I'm being particularly supportive for her, but I certainly value the support she gives me. Is it the best form of social security? Well, similar to Ross, it is for me. It works for us. It doesn't work for everybody. And I think we do need to be careful not to assume that once a couple is married that everything is rosy from then on. They may well need support. It may not be the best choice they've made. Marriages do break down for all sorts of reasons. People stick in marriages which possibly are not the best choice either. Social security. When I first heard the question, I was thinking, oh, crikey, that sort of benefits and all that money. Well, clearly, we provided a whole bunch of different angles to that, the interpretation of social security. I think marriage for our society, partnerships, trusting partnerships, loving partnerships are clearly the bedrock of how we choose to organise our society. But we do need to value people as individuals. We need to value those relationships as unique, and that's what we as Lib Dems do, is we value the uniqueness of everybody's situation.
As my wife is in the audience, and as we will have been married 49 years next month, for me the answer is obvious. Anyway, I want to thank, ladies and gentlemen, you've been a wonderful panel. I've enjoyed their answers. I've learned some things. I'm not quite certain about some of the things they've said, but I would value it if you would show your appreciation for them.